We're always told that marriage is supposed to be this perfect fairy tale. But what if I told you that the best person to guide you to a lasting love isn't a poet, but the guy who literally profits when marriages fail? Yeah, today we're looking at love through the brutally honest eyes of James Sexton, one of the world's top divorce lawyers. And his perspective, well, it might just be the secret to actually making it work.
Okay, so after 2 decades of taking marriages apart, Sexton doesn't sugarcoat the odds. He's super blunt about it. If you get married today, there's a 56% chance it's going to end in divorce. That's better than a coin toss in the wrong direction.
But hold on, because that's just the legal number. Sexton argues the real failure rate is way, way higher. When you add in all the couples who don't officially split but are just totally miserable together, that number jumps to a frankly terrifying 75%.
And here's where it gets really weird. Here's the paradox. Despite those awful odds, 86% of people who get divorced, they turn around and get remarried, usually within just 5 years. It just goes to show how badly we want that connection, right?
So that brings us to the big question, the one Sexton really digs into. Why? Why do we keep signing up for something that has such a high chance of failure? He thinks the answer is pretty simple. We have a fundamental misunderstanding of what marriage actually is.
So, how do we get beyond that fairy tale? Well, Sexton says we need to see marriage for what it really is. It's not just a romantic idea. It's a technology. And maybe most importantly, it's a legally binding contract.
And here's the crazy part. Most of us will walk into the single most legally important contract of our entire lives without ever reading the terms and conditions. I mean, would you do that with a mortgage? And what's worse, those terms can be changed by the government whenever they want, long after you've already signed up.
This is where that word comes in, the prenup. But Sexton wants us to think about it in a totally different way. A prenup isn't a plan to fail. It's just two people saying, hey, you know who's in a better position to make rules for our lives? Us, not a bunch of politicians.
And make no mistake, these things have teeth. The wildest one Sexton ever saw had this clause in it, tying the wife's alimony directly to her weight. I know, it sounds awful, but the court said, yep, that's a contract. It just proves how powerful these documents can be.
But they don't have to be like that at all. In fact, he says the simplest, most effective prenup just creates 3 basic buckets for your money. What's yours, what's mine, and what's ours. That's it. This super simple framework forces you to have an honest, ongoing conversation about money, which is, kind of important for a healthy partnership. So here's the bottom line on this. Thinking about a prenup isn't unromantic. It's actually the ultimate act of proactive communication. It's about building your marriage on a foundation of clarity and honesty, not just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
And that whole idea of proactive communication, it leads perfectly into Sexton's next big point. He wants to bust another myth, this idea that a good relationship should just be easy. He says, no way. Think of it like your car or your health. If you don't do regular maintenance, it is absolutely going to break down.
So what does this maintenance actually look like? Well, first, you have to remember the difference between a spouse and a roommate. And Sexton is very blunt here. It's sex. He says physical intimacy is the glue. It's definitional. And it's often the first warning sign, that canary in the coal mine, that things are starting to go wrong. The real core of this preventative maintenance is having the uncomfortable conversations before they turn into huge, explosive fights. It's about sitting down when you're both calm and you actually like each other, and figuring out the rules for when you don't.
And look, this doesn't have to be some heavy, soul-searching stuff all the time. Maintenance can be as simple as leaving a little note, giving a real compliment, just noticing the small things that made you fall for them in the first place. These are like making small, consistent deposits into your relationship bank account.
At the end of the day, all this preventative maintenance is really an investment. What you're doing is consciously trading a little bit of comfort right now, the comfort of avoiding a tough subject, for a much bigger reward later on, a real, deep, resilient connection. So, all of this brings us to the final and maybe the most profound idea from Sexton's work. I mean, after watching love dissolve into paperwork for 20 years, what does this guy really think about love itself?
Well, he thinks it's completely insane. Seriously. Because to truly love anything, a person, a pet, whatever, is to sign up for the absolute 100% certainty that one day you will lose it. And that loss is going to break your heart.
But, and this is the whole point, that certainty of pain, that isn't a reason to not love. In fact, it might be the very thing that gives love all of its meaning and its power. We are all, as he puts it, losing everyone all the time.
And that just reframes everything, doesn't it? Love isn't just a feeling. It's an act of courage. Something can only be brave if it's also terrifying. We choose to love in spite of the guaranteed heartbreak because we decide that connection is worth the risk.
So maybe we've had it wrong this whole time. Maybe true love isn't about finding some perfect soulmate for a fairy tale ending. Maybe, just maybe, it's about consciously and bravely choosing to connect with another person, knowing it won't last forever, and loving them with everything you've got anyway.